Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Before we get started today, I just want to let you guys know that this episode is brought to you by Onnit. From their awesome fitness equipment to their ultra high quality health supplements, Onnit offers an entire range of products to help you become superhuman. Check them out at jle.vi/ONNIT and use the coupon code GETONIT for 10% off today. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this week's show. I hope you guys are hungry for some knowledge. Actually, hungry is the operative word because my guest today is the expert on an interesting little habit called intermittent fasting. Now, you guys might remember intermittent fasting as something that came up in our episode with Ben Greenfield. It's actually something he swears by, and so we decided to check it out today. So back to our guest, he's a lifelong fitness enthusiast with an undergraduate degree in applied human nutrition. After university, he joined a small nutritional supplement company, and over the course of 6 years, he proceeded to help them grow into one of the world's largest supplement companies as their research and development manager. During that time, he traveled the world, meeting everyone from researchers to ingredient manufacturers, world-class athletes, bodybuilders, you name it. I'd say that alone makes him a great candidate for the show. But hold on, because it actually gets better. After 6 years, he jumped back into academia and he did the graduate level thing to figure out what exactly were the metabolic effects of short-term fasting, of all things. This groundbreaking work rendered him one of the world's experts and has caused him to publish books such as Eat, Stop, Eat and How Much Protein. Today, he publishes a popular blog on these topics and much, much more, and he offers the benefits of his combined industry, insider, and academic backgrounds. You guys are really going to love this episode. We get a chance to learn the ins and outs of intermittent fasting and figure out why the hell you should care. We talk supplements and the problems with the supplement industry. You even get some homework assignments and things to try out during the week. One thing, guys, that I would like to ask is a small favor. After you listen to this episode, do me a favor and send me an email or tweet to @GoSuperhuman and let me know one thing you liked or didn't like about this episode. I have to admit that although we see the statistics and thousands upon thousands of you guys are downloading every week, it can get a bit lonely if you guys aren't writing in with your feedback and comments. So please take a second to do that. All right, enough mushy crying and whining and complaining. Let's meet Mr. Brad Pilon. Mr. Brad Pilon. Is it Pilon? Is it Pilon?
No, you can go Pilon, either one.
Pilon.
I go Pilon, yeah.
Pilon. Mr. Brad Pilon, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Fantastical. I am very excited to get into intermittent fasting because it's something that has come up in a couple episodes. I just talked to Ben Greenfield recently and he was talking about how he fasts every day. So I figured, hey, let's get the expert on. Let's talk about really what this thing is, why it's becoming so popular, why so many people are advocating it. I think you can answer those questions for us. So I'm pretty stoked.
It's a topic I like to talk about, so that works perfectly.
To talk about, to blog about, to write about.
To write about, to everything.
I love it. So there's a lot I want to ask you, Brad. I have to admit, it was hard for me to pick questions that would fit into one interview. But I think I'll start by asking, when was the last time you ate?
That is a good question and a relevant question. Breakfast today. I just finished my fast up yesterday. So had a little Greek yogurt this morning and an espresso, and I'm good to go.
Love it. So very low calorie breakfast then.
Yeah, I've never been I like breakfast. Never been a big breakfast person. I hold out for the odd occasional brunch. I'm a big brunch guy. If mimosas are involved, I'm good. But
Ooh.
For breakfast, I had to get it eaten and then get on my day.
All right. So you're already less of a fanatical diet guy than I was expecting, I have to admit. That you would be like, no alcohol, no dairy.
Yeah, no.
No, not happening.
No, never.
I love it. All right. So we're going to get a good perspective here. So let me ask this. Like I said, intermittent fasting is not a new concept on the show, but it's not something we've covered in nearly enough depth. So tell me why it's such an interesting discovery in nutrition and fitness, and feel free not to spare me the kind of gory scientific terminology and details, because I really love that stuff.
Absolutely. All right. So from a science point of view, and just purely from a sort of a nutritional interest point of view, intermittent fasting gave us this concept that it was all right to occasionally take a break from eating, right? So we're right now, most of the people who'd be listening to this, because they obviously have access to a computer, are in an area where they have pretty quick access to food. At any given time they want, you could probably go out and find something to eat. And so because of that, we're in a sort of a situation we are constantly in the fed state, right? We eat all the way up until bedtime. And then we get up, and most of us eat before we even take our morning shower, right? We just keep going. And there's a group of us who probably get up sometime in the middle of the night to also eat some more. We're just fed. We're just constantly feeding, and our body is constantly dealing with a massive influx of stuff, right? It comes into your mouth, and then majority of it enters into your body from your GI tract, and it's got to be dealt with. So your body is working constantly to deal with this stuff, right? So it's got these micronutrients and it's vitamins and minerals, and it's allocating those to enzymes, and then it's got these big macronutrients, right? These carbs, these fats, these proteins that are basically just our version of hydrocarbons, right? Just big, long carbon chains that it's got to deal with. And so if it's not burning these carbons, right, and these carbon chains, they got to be put somewhere, right? Because they can't just disappear. We haven't gotten to the point yet where we can just make actual matter disappear. So it's got to go somewhere. So either it leaves your body or it stays in your body. And that's constant work that's going on. Every minute of every day that you're eating, your body's trying to figure out where the hell to put this stuff. Then intermittent fasting comes along, and it's kind of like, hey, what happens? Just curious question. What happens when we stop eating? And we, the available research, and there's quite an extensive amount of research, believe it or not. This isn't, well, it's new to us in nutrition and eating. From a scientific point of view, intermittent fasting isn't that new because we have lots of data, because half the time fasting was the placebo, right? In sort of various trials.
Right.
So you can go back to that research and go, oh, well, I'll tell you exactly what happens. Your body starts to fall out of the fed state, starts to move into the fasted state, and then you have this massive change in hormones and enzymes levels that instead of now deal with, putting things away for later use, now they're pulling things back out to be used because nothing's coming in through your mouth. Well, okay, that from a dieter's point of view, that sounds kind of ideal, right? Because most of the stuff we're pulling out to be used is body fat. And then, we stopped and we thought, wait a sec, hold on, because we've read our fitness magazines and we know that the stuff you lose first is muscle.
Is it?
Yeah. And science came back and said, no, guys, it's a really simple measurement called an RQ, or respiratory quotient. We've been doing this measurement since like the beginning of time, and it clearly shows that the longer you go without eating, the more fat you're burning. And if that's not true, we have to go back and start from scratch in nutritional sciences. It's kind of one of our fundamental measurements. So then we went, oh, okay, well, so I don't eat and I just start burning more and more fat. This kind of sounds really interesting. And what happened was, for a large amount of people who, are good at dieting, really like the monotony, and they like the measuring, and they like the stopwatch going off every 4 hours to tell you when to eat, they went, that's kind of cool. I'll read a couple articles about it, but I'll pass. But for the rest of us, the majority of us who hate the idea of never eating the foods we love, or eating on a schedule, or measuring stuff, we thought, wait a sec. This sounds interesting. So you can tell me I can take a break every once in a while and burn some fat, and it's essentially like taking all a week's worth of dieting and squeezing it into one little time. I'm in. And that's basically how fasting started getting very, very popular. I'm not going to say a lazy person's approach to dieting, which is kind of, the way I view it for me personally, but more for someone who just goes for the easiest possible solution, right? So you could diet every single day, or you could diet once or twice a week for a shorter amount of time, but we're talking diet as in 0 calories. and get the same result. So that was the main push, right? The main realization that this has application for the average person.
Sure. But it almost sounds like it's a calories in, calories out thing and creating a caloric deficit.
Yep.
But there's a lot more to it, right? I mean, there is ketogenic thing. Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, you have to divide up the actual weight loss component from the actual health or metabolic component. So the weight loss is literally if you're breathing and not eating, you're losing weight. And that's it, right? There's no more magic that you need to know other than if the carbon dioxide is being breathed out, you're losing weight. It's the rest of the stuff that made intermittent fasting really, really interesting, because that was the concept of if we're in a constant state of overabundance, right? If you're constantly shoving more carbs or more fat or even more protein, more everything into your body than it's used to, is it just lowering calories back down that has the full health and metabolic benefit? Or is it these periods of nothing, right? These kind of resets where you actually give your body a chance to not deal with, let's say, sugar, not deal with the sugar load. So instead of just lowering the sugar load, now we have periods of time where the net sugar intake is zero. And it's a very different concept than just simply saying, okay, go back to a lower carbohydrate or lower sugar or lower fat, whatever you want to do, diet. This is now a situation where your body has a chance to recover from the periods of overabundance. And it's something that dieting's never really done. So we quickly looked at intermittent fasting and went, well, this is a calories in, calories out thing, which is almost completely true for the weight loss part, right? But for the metabolic effects, for A, deciding where that weight comes from, and B, deciding is there health properties to intermittent fasting possibly beyond what we've seen with dieting before? And the answer is most likely, and it comes from the idea of you're taking these large, true breaks from total intake and giving your body this recovery time to adapt or to repair from the damage that's been done.
I see. So damage, not just from things like free radicals, but also from wear and tear.
Exactly. It's a lot of work. If you think about constant fed state, it's a wear and tear on the entire system. You could argue that a lot of diseases are just from the wear and tear of dealing with a specific macronutrient in excess for chronic periods of time.
Wow.
So we're saying, all right, well then take a chunk of time out and recover from that. So that seems to be where we're getting some of the extra health benefits.
Although it almost sounds like you're saying, forget dieting, I can eat whatever I want and lose weight if I'm fasting. And that sounds almost too good to be true.
It is too good to be true, but you can't eat whatever you want. You just can't eat as much of it as you want, right? So we have evidence from a span of different diet protocols that they all have at least some mediocre benefit as long as there is calorie restriction. Now, the calorie restriction can be different depending on the makeup of the diet, but they'll all work to some degree. The main issue you run into is the overabundance. So it isn't a fast, then eat like it's a day after Halloween for a couple of days, then fast, then eat like it's a day after Thanksgiving with leftover. There has to be responsible eating in between. No matter how long you fast for, you can't make up for just gluttony afterwards. Sure. Yeah. So there is a level of responsibility in between the fasts that you're always going to have to take part in.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about allowing the body to recover and then to reactivate these different processes that our bodies are able to do. What are some of those processes? I mean, what's happening in my body if I fast or if I'm used to fasting that's not happening to someone who's in a fully fed state?
The main thing is the lipolysis, or the release of fat from your fat stores and using that fat as a fuel. It's something that everybody does. The difference being is that the majority of people are using fat as a fuel, and that fat was just the fat that just came in your body a couple hours ago from your food.
That's ketosis, right?
Ketosis is part of fat loss. It's not the entirety of losing body fat. It's one of the processes that goes along with it. But the main thing is just being able to move in and out of from a high RQ where you're burning mostly sugar down to a lower RQ where you're burning mostly fat, and being able to move up and down. They've used the term metabolic flexibility to kind of describe that, your ability to move back and forth through these different metabolic states.
So kind of like you're a Toyota Prius, you have a choice of which energy source depending on where you are in the day and what your needs are.
I would have picked a cooler hybrid, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're not quite the Tesla, right? But
not quite a Tesla, yeah.
I actually just learned the other day, which I never knew, and I've been into this stuff for a while. There is a process in the body by which your body can actually take lactic acid I guess, run it through the liver or run it through, I believe it's the liver, and break it down and then reuse it as glucose.
Yep, Cori cycle, it can do that with, there's a cycle for lactic acid, there's a cycle for pyruvate as well, maybe. There's a couple, yeah. So that's one of the ways that exercise kind of comes into play when we talk about fasting and just, the ability to maintain your blood sugar, which is sort of one thing that people always worry about with fast, even though they're brief. And one of the answers is that there are multiple sort of small areas where your body can gather up some more sources to make glucose out of. The other thing is that, when we're dealing with like a 24-hour fast or under, chances are your liver glycogen never gets down to zero, right? You're still just getting rid of some of the glycogen that's already been stored for just this scenario.
Sure. In muscles.
Muscles and your liver. Now, with the muscle stuff is for your muscles, the little greedy guys keep it themselves, right? So the glycogen in your right bicep, that's just your right bicep's glycogen. Right. So that's why you can come out of a fast and be, for the most part, glycogen full in the muscle groups, but your liver will be greatly diminished unless you were training during the fast.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
It's very cool. I actually have a trainer. I have a couple trainers who they'll find out that I've been fasting before a workout and they just like beat me over the head and they're like, why, you're an idiot. Why didn't you eat something? I'm like, actually, because I'm trying to burn off that muscle glycogen. I've been burning the liver glycogen off all day, but the muscle glycogen. What are your thoughts on working out in the fasted state? I mean,
I do it. So I'm not a performance athlete. I'm 38. I missed my draft year by about 20 years, so I'm not going pro in any sports. The Olympics haven't called, and there's not any sport that I'm overly good at. So I'm not a performance athlete. I am a recreational athlete who's mostly interested in not being sore and broken when I get older and training for vanity. I mean, that's just what it is. So my training is not that intense, right? I do not end in a pile of blood and sweat at the end of every workout in the gym. And I don't really care if I curled 40s or 35s, right, on any given workout, as long as I challenge the muscle. So I train most of the time in the fasted state just because that's kind of how my schedule works out. If I had a choice, it wouldn't matter. I'll train fed, I'll train fasted. I'll train at the exact time where I really, really want to train because I think that psychology of actually being pumped for the workout is way more important than trying to time it with some magical period, right?
Sure.
So I don't generally train in the middle of a fast. The way my fasts are set up, I'm always sleeping in the middle of one, right? So I've either probably ate in the last hour or two, or I'm about to eat in another couple hours, right? So I don't really concern myself with it too much because I know I'm going to eat to recover and repair muscle. And then I haven't found any real detriment in my personal strength or, zest in the gym, whether I'm training at the end of a fast or in the middle of a day.
I see. Let me ask this. I almost forgot to ask. Well, there's two other elements I think we haven't covered. And I have to admit, I did a little bit of homework before. So one is the idea of insulin sensitivity, which comes back to what you were talking about. We're constantly fed. Our bodies are no longer, what is insulin insensitivity when people talk about that?
It's measured in a number of different ways, but the most basic way to describe this is just the amount of insulin that's being released into your bloodstream by your body relative to the amount of glucose in your blood and then the change in that glucose level. So what you'd like to see is an elevated glucose level. Your body goes, all right, releases some insulin, and the glucose levels go down at a very defined curve that we've got in textbooks, etc. If you are insulin insensitive, that exact same process happens. Glucose comes out, and then maybe a bit more glucose is needed before your insulin's like, all right, fine, I'll kick in the gear here. And your insulin goes up. And then the glucose goes down at a bit of a slower rate than we'd like, right? And that would be glucose insensitivity. And then quite the opposite is being highly glucose sensitive, which is just the insulin kicks in a bit earlier and the glucose drops a bit quicker, or at least much closer to the line than we'd like.
I see. So you want to be in that happy medium.
Yeah, you really do. There's so much going on with insulin sensitivity. We're really getting to the point now where we can measure it, not just whole body, but we can measure sort of lean versus fat. But we're going to have to get farther because, specifically after fasting, you have a situation where your muscles, technically if you fasted, not for an extended period of time, let's say like 20, 24 hours, you fasted for 20, 24 hours, your liver glycogen is going to be low, but your muscle glycogen is going to be high. So you eat something because you're done your fast. Glucose comes into your body. insulin goes up, but now you've got all these different components, right? Your muscles are sitting there going like, I don't need that. Right? I'm full.
I'm good.
Yeah, your liver's sitting there going like, I'm not even going to let anybody else touch this stuff. And then your fat's sitting there going like, guys, I'm the one who shrank here. So can I have some too? So different components of your body will have different insulin sensitivities depending on what's been going on. That affects the speed at which glucose leaves your bloodstream. And then depending on which one of those compartments you measured, you're going to come up with kind of different answers as to what a person's sensitivity is like. So not quite there, but we're getting to the point where we're really going to have this sort of multifactorial picture of insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity, where we'll look at specific organs, muscles, and fat, maybe even different fat compartments, and really get a good picture of what's going on.
I see. So break down on a continuum for me, because you hear terms like insulin insensitivity. You obviously hear about type 1, type 2 diabetes, and then you hear about metabolic syndrome. What are the differences practically between those things?
They vary depending on who you're talking to, right? So diabetes, type 1 and type 2, have very defined characteristics. Oh, sorry, they used to anyways, right? Yeah.
Everything used to be so much simpler.
Type 1 was just very simple.
Obese was obese, you know?
Yeah, right? So let me try to get this. One is a lack of insulin production, typically from birth. You're dealing with damage to the pancreas or the islets or islets, depending on how you want to say it, of Langerhans. Wow, I think I got that right too. I'm not sure. But anyway, the actual cells that produce insulin in your body.
Okay.
The other type of diabetes is the one where the body just stopped responding to that insulin. Then you have kind of a combo where your body stopped responding for so long that now insulin production is being compromised. You have the, gestational diabetes, which is a diabetes that occurs during pregnancy. There's a diabetes that has to do with growth hormone levels, right? So you have a growth hormone related diabetes. Now we're finding out that there's actually testosterone related diabetes as well, right? You have metabolic syndrome, which is a level of insulin insensitivity combined with high blood glucose levels sort of chronically combined with obesity. Then you just have compromised insulin sensitivity levels.
Wow.
Right? So it's a very, very large and complex kind of...
Well, and it makes sense. I mean, this glucose, right, is the entire driving energy of everything we do, all of our energy sources. There's only one kind of energy our body can use, and that's glucose. It all breaks down to that. Every kind of energy we consume goes into that. So it makes sense that there would be many different ways and many different problems with that system. It's like the engine in your car. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different ways to generate power, things like that. So
end of the day, you want combustion, right? So
yeah, at the end of the day, you want that glucose broken down.
Yeah. Now, the fun thing with insulin sensitivity, again, not the fun thing, but the issue with that one is it seems to be a very acute measurement. We have the H1, I'm blanking on the H1ABC, H1B. Anyway, we have long-term measurement of kind of what your blood glucose levels have been. So we can tell you if they've been chronically elevated or not. But insulin sensitivity, it varies throughout the day. It varies based on meals. It varies on exercise levels. So it can even peak and you can look insulin resistant, then it can come back down lower, and now you're really sensitive, right? So
I see.
It's a difficult thing to really correlate, right? You'd have to have sort of those chronic long-term measurements with a baseline, of course. They got a kind of a picture of what's going on there.
But let me ask this, and kind of coming back to the two benefits I think we didn't cover, fasting is supposed to help with insulin sensitivity.
Absolutely.
That's one of those systems.
Completely true. But if you were to measure right after a fast, especially if you didn't train during the fast, and liver is depleted but muscle is full of glycogen, you may actually find, depending on the time frame you measured, how quickly right after a fast you start measuring, a person might actually look insulin insensitive, right? Because your blood's still full of free fatty acids because you've been releasing body fat for a fuel. So the minute you decide, all right, I'm done fasting, I'm having a bagel, all those free fatty acids just don't disappear, right? They've got to be shunted away and put away again, right? So your blood's full of free fatty acids that need to be put away, but you're now introducing glucose and fats and proteins and fiber back into your body. So if you were to measure in that, that first hour or two, you might actually look insulin insensitive. But then if you chronically follow it, you're like, oh, wait, no, hold on. It looks like insulin sensitivity is actually improving.
In the long term.
Exactly, for the reasons we've mentioned. So it all has to do with measurement, time, et cetera. Science is fun, right?
I love it. And so that's a really huge, important point. I mean, your body has one engine, which is metabolizing glucose. And you don't want anything to be wrong with that process. But another one that I've personally experimented with is mental clarity. So not only do you not have all the blood going to your stomach and your body focusing so much on digesting, as you said, but also your body kind of kicks up some of these hormones and you become more alert, you become more aware under the pretense, your body thinking, this means I'm going to be more likely to find food if I turn up the mental faculties. Have you experienced that as well?
I've experienced it. It's an area I wish I did more research on the mental aspects of fasting. I mean, my original research was purely metabolic and weight loss. Mm-hmm. So I've experienced it. I do my best writing when I'm fasted.
Agreed.
So I experienced it myself. I couldn't really tell you the proposed mechanisms behind it though, but I do know that it's something that's often reported with fasting.
Well, and it makes sense as a survival mechanism for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Brad. Is this for everybody?
Depends on how we word that. The lessons we learn from intermittent fasting, absolutely. The fact that you can pick and choose when to eat, you can eat when you are hungry. You don't have to eat if you're not hungry.
Save a lot of time.
Yeah. The specific time frames, eat, stop, eat once or twice a week for 24 hours, 24 might not be for everybody. Or the 16 hours every day might not be everybody. But the lessons and the ability to adapt it to yourself, that for sure is for everybody. Even people who are contraindicated to fasting, whether it's diabetic or some other medical condition, the lessons within fasting are helpful.
I love that. So it sounds like there's some adaptability and scalability. What I would want to ask, and we like to give homeworks for people to experiment with, of course, without taking any liability.
Yeah,
but what I'd like to ask is, could you break down a sort of idealized baseline schedule? Because personally, I try to fast 1 to 2 times a week for 18 to 24 hours. But I've also been told by Ben Greenfield that he does a 12-hour fast every day. So the question is, what does an ideal week look like in terms of frequency? And before I have you answer, I'm going to hit pause real quick, just get the audience hooked on that really interesting question, and mention our episode sponsors. All right, at this point, I just want to take a quick second and hit pause to let you guys know that this episode is brought to you by Onnit. I first discovered Onnit through Tim Ferriss, who also swears by their stuff, and I've had the chance to try a bunch of their products, from their chewable melatonin to their Alpha Brain Balanced Nootropic and even New Mood, which helps reduce stress and improve your mood. But Onnit has much more to offer, from ultra high quality protein to fitness equipment and more. Please take a moment and show support for the show by visiting jle.vi/onnit and using the coupon code GETONIT to save 10%. All right, back to the show. All right, we're back here with Mr. Brad Pilon, who's been chewing on a question about the idealized schedule for intermittent fasting. We want to experiment it. We want to play with it. We want to see if it works for us. So, Brad, take it away.
All right, so obviously the answer I should give here is, for me, it's 1 to twice a week, 20 to 24 hours long. The fast is divided between 2 days, right? So we'd start today at 2 p.m. We'd fast till tomorrow at roughly 2 p.m., mostly because that's Eat, Stop, Eat, and that's the book I wrote. But the actual true answer is, there's a couple factors we're going to put into play here. The more frequently you want to fast, the lower your fast should be. So if you're an everyday kind of person, when you're like, Brad, I want the monotony of every day. My life is craving this. I'm a pattern type of person. It needs to be every day. All right, cool. Your fasts are going to be 12 to 16 hours, right? That's a very good sort of everyday thing. 16 on the high side, 12 is nice on the low side. And remember, this is also including the time you're sleeping. So you're already, I'm guessing, fasting for, let's say, 6 to 8 hours, depending on how much sleep you get. So that 12-hour one is just extending that window, right? So 10 at night, you're like, okay, I'm eating for the day. Nothing good is going to happen. I'm going to sit down. I'm watching Suits right now. Nothing good is going to happen if I start eating, because it's going to be ice cream and chips. And I'm just going to blow the day. So I'm just going to say I'm done. And the next day, you just start back up at 10. That's kind of a cool way to look at it, right?
Okay.
Then you go all the way up to 16. Now, if you're not quite an everyday person, maybe you're every other day, right? So you still want the sort of routine. You want it to be, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, clockwork kind of thing. Cool. You can go 16 to 20 with that one. I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
Then you're like, okay, Brad, actually, I'm with you. I like 1 to twice a week. I love the flexibility of it. I want to plan to fast on Tuesday, but if something comes up, I want to just be able to move it to Wednesday, right? I want that kind of flexibility. There's your 20 to 24 hour fast.
That's a once a week fast.
Yeah, once, maybe twice, right? That kind of thing. And then that's kind of my limit. Like if you want to push it up to 36 because you're a very infrequent faster, you kind of I might do this once or twice a month kind of thing. That's cool. Just play with it and experiment with it. But that's my general idea. So the more frequent, the lower the duration of your fast.
I see. And go off of your lifestyle. Listen to your calendar. If someone has the discipline to choose between those, I mean, what is the idealized schedule?
My bias is once or twice a week. Because what I found is just with Eat, Stop, Eat, and again, reminding everybody I'm crazy biased here, is that people seem to be, the people who embrace that flexibility, the idea of it being 24-ish hours and then once or twice a week, they're the ones who seem to be able to just maintain fasting for years, right? It's just what they do to maintain their body weight, fasting, responsible eating, and it just sort of becomes a flow in what they do. I find that people who tend to try to fix all their problems and the world's problems by just fasting as much as they can, it becomes just like a diet and they eventually burn out. Right. So the thing about once or twice, and I like it, is it allows for mess ups and oopses, right? It allows you to think in terms of, all right, my cousin Sally is getting married on Saturday. I'm going to the wedding. I'm not fasting. Perfect. Right. I'm allowing myself to do this. Whereas if you're a diehard everyday faster plus crazy diet schemes, well, Sally's wedding sucks and it messes up your program. Right. And so you're kind of going to the wedding feeling guilty. And what does a human being do when they go to somewhere feeling guilty about what they're eating? They eat everything, right? We don't just kind of have a little nibble. We're the one at the buffet fending other people off with a fork, right? Like it's that kind of thing. So I find that just the flexibility of once or twice a week also allows people to then still have to focus on you and I talked earlier about like responsible eating, which is kind of a cop out of me telling people how to eat. But with once or twice, you're taking a break from eating, right? Mm-hmm. Every so often, you're disrupting the eating pattern with this occasional break. With more frequent fasting, what I find is you can get to the point, especially people who go crazy and do like 24-hour fasts every day or whatever the crazy thing is. They're taking a break from fasting to eat for a little bit and go right back into fasting.
Right.
I just don't know how sustainable that is or even how good that is, especially for the people who are very obese and thus have some, probably some underlying metabolic issues just from the obesity, or the people who are very, very lean and just don't have the energy stores to cope with that much not eating, right? So big fan for the average person trying to just get back into beach ready shape and just be really happy with their bodies. 20 to 24 hours, once or twice a week is what I recommend.
So it's eat, stop, eat. It's very clearly not stop, eat. Stop.
Exactly. Couldn't say it better.
I love that. I used to have a friend in business school who had to eat pretty much every 3 to 4 hours. He was a bodybuilder type guy. Yep. And if he didn't, he'd get super testy, hungry, fatigued, all that kind of nasty stuff. And we sort of knew that he wasn't kidding around. This wasn't a joke when he busted out a Tupperware full of chicken and veggies in the middle of an exam and just starts wailing on this like over his Scantron. So I guess my question would be, what would you say to anyone who thinks that maybe they couldn't possibly survive without eating every 6 hours?
That was me. I mean, I've told this story before, but in university or college, Canadian university, my girlfriend, now wife, used to have to carry like Mesotech protein bars in her purse. Because if I didn't eat every couple hours, like if we went shopping or something and I didn't have food, I was irritable and I was tired and I was fatigued. So I was completely there, right? And a lot of it is food expectation and food want.
Oh, interesting.
I tell a story a lot about, experiences I've had when I first started fasting and really kind of realizing what was going on in the connection between my head and the desire for food is I was back in my hometown after like my second year of university. So that kind of summer break. And I wanted an Arby's and not really hamburgers, like roast beef sandwiches.
Oh boy.
They're awesome, right? And so I came from a university town where every single thing is 24 hours, right? So it was like 7 at night. We're not talking late. I got in my car. I'm like, I am going for Arby's. This is going to be wicked. Like, I think I just finished a workout, right? So what better to have than Arby's? And I drove to the Arby's and it was closed. And I don't know
Heartbreak.
who closes. It closed at 6. Nobody closes a fast food restaurant at 6, right? So I'm not from a small town. There's a population of like 250,000. On the street where the Arby's was, there are a dozen fast food chains, right? I'd also was living back with my parents at the time, so it's not like the fridge wasn't full of food. But I was irate and hungry and irritable because I wanted Arby's. I didn't want anything else, right? And so that kind of goes a long way for when you're expecting to eat and you can't eat. Another great example is I fast for 24 hours once or twice a week for the last decade, right? Like this is not new to me. If you're like a half hour late for lunch with me, I'm angry. And it's not because it was inconsiderate. It's because I'm hungry because I was expecting to eat. Right. So that expectation is something that it takes a long time to break. My first couple fasts, there was I don't know if it's still out now, a Gatorade. It was like a lighter G2 or something. It was like a watered down version of Gatorade. I carried that around with me just in case. Just in case, right? So it takes a bit to really realize that a lot of what we perceive as hunger is just really wanting to eat.
So it's more psychological than anything.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that. The thing about that is it doesn't mean it's not real, right? It's not like I was faking being irritable and pissy. Like I was irritable and pissy for sure, right? And I felt hungry because the cephalic reflex, food expectation is quite a real phenomenon, right? So by me wanting food, I triggered my body to prepare to eat, right? There was actually a pre-meal slight increase
in Pavlovic thing, hey?
Exactly. So I'm not saying it's not real at all. What I'm saying is it's just as it was trained into you, you can untrain it to a degree.
That's very interesting because when I learned about intermittent fasting, I think a lot about Paleolithic man and what our bodies are designed and evolved to do. And you think about also with the 1 or 2 fasts a week. I mean, if the tribe and I take down a wildebeest, it's going to keep for 2 or 3 days. We're going to eat well for 2 or 3 days, and then that's it, right? It spoils. Without refrigeration, you don't have access to food every day. And without greenhouses and GMOs, you don't have access to veggies even every day, right? It's kind of catch as catch comes. You're eating a lot of shrubs and low-calorie foods until you find the next kill or the next banana tree that happens to be ripe, whatever it is. And this is also another thing that our bodies are not evolved, I guess, to expect food. We're evolved to say, holy crap, I found food. Now I'm ready and I'm preparing my body to consume it. But thousands of years ago, there was really probably no expectation that I'm going to eat at this specific hour.
Yeah, that would be nice.
It would be nice. The wildebeest should arrive in half an hour, son. So
he's half hour late. He's being an inconsiderate prick right now. Because, we need to eat him. Yeah, no, I agree. It was just so available. It's just so easy now. I mean, there isn't much in life that's as easy as finding food for people who have so your basic needs met. You've got shelter and you've got some money. Food's there for you.
Always, yeah. I mean, even this is a terrible example, but you look at like the homeless population. There's huge access to food. You can get a hamburger for $1, menu, right? So like you're dealing more with exposure, you're dealing more with alcoholism in that population than you're dealing with actual hunger, which I think is telling just about how available food is, not underplaying the horrors and the travesty of the homeless population or anything like that. But it is telling that throughout evolution, feeding ourselves was one of the hardest things we did, and now it's one of the easiest.
Exactly.
Brad, let me ask this. You mentioned protein bars, which reminded me that you actually started your career in the supplement industry. And I guess my main question is I'm curious what you learned while rubbing elbows with folks like Arnold Schwarzenegger and the most elite researchers and top athletes in the world.
It was great. Such a good time. So it was about 6 or 7 years, that I spent in the industry. And in all of that time was in research and development. So I learned some interesting things myself. Like I am not a marketer. Like I can't market worth crap because of my love for science. It gets to the point where you can't really communicate with people as well as you'd like to. Really talking with key researchers, you realize there is a very large divide because it's going to have really hard to explain. Marketing drives public interest. Right? Public interest kind of then drives what people write about in magazines because you want people to buy the magazines, right? Magazines tend to drive even a larger curiosity. Curiosity kind of comes back and drives ideas for science, things to look into. Mm-hmm. The problem is by the time the ideas hit science and they're like, this is interesting, people think this, we should investigate it. And then you investigate it. And, you go for funding and you do your proposal. And then by the time you're like, hey, my study's almost done, I'm writing it up, it should be published in a couple of months, interest has moved on.
Nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, so it's a very big disconnect where, science comes out 2 years and go, oh, guys, we actually have the answers to that. And everybody's looking around going, dude, we're on to something else. Why are you talking about that still?
What's an example of that during your time?
A couple of great examples. I find leucine, mTOR, branched-chain amino acids, all that was very, very interesting research that was really moving at a very quick rate until people kind of it's still moving at a great rate, but we kind of got bored and moved on from it, right? A couple of people had a really good blog post or two about mTOR. A couple of great supplements were launched that made a lot of money. And then, supplement company was kind of tapped out and realized, let's move to pump products and vasodilators. So they launched those. And then,
oh yeah, the big NO explode thing.
Yeah. So then, online science blog, we're really kind of commentators, right? So then we're like, all right, we're going to look in this arginine NO2 connection. So we go on about that and we start writing about it. And then mainstream media starts writing about it. And then somewhere in the midst of that, a new product comes out. We've moved on again. Meanwhile, science is like, guys, I found some cool stuff on that mTOR you were talking about. And everybody's like, dude, what? You're so far behind, right? You're like season 1, we're season 4, right? So we won't spoilers for you, but you got to stop talking. And so it's this giant disconnect. And that was a really frustrating part in working in R&D for the supplement companies, is because everybody demands that supplement companies do research. So supplement companies are like, fine, all right, well, we're going to throw tons of money at research.
Yeah, it's not cheap, eh?
No, it's not cheap, but it's slow, right? So it's almost like it's forcing the companies to spend money that inevitably hurts their ability to launch on time, to be competitive in the marketplace. So then they come back at the guys in research and development, and we're going like, there's no way to speed this up. Like, unless we just move everything in-house, so do the research ourselves. But then it loses that credibility, right? So it was a very disconnected thing where you looked at what the public and the consumers were yelling and screaming for, but at the same time, looking at what we were doing. So then we had to do crystal ball type stuff and go, okay, we're going to try to run 4 or 5 different trials that are out there thinking, and hope that by the time one of them are done, the market's ready for one of the ideas.
Shoot where the target's going.
Yeah. Again, you can have one of the best ideas ever with the right research, but if the market's not there right now, right, it's very hard to launch. Yeah. So you've finally done some research and you realize that, holy crap, Boron and Smilax are some of those early 80 products. One of them actually works really well, but the rest of the world's into creatine. Yeah. You're like, but it doesn't matter how good my research is right now because everybody's moved on.
And that's an interesting thing, because I remember creatine being all the rage when I was a high school athlete. It was controversial. Where does it come from? Is it safe? It's causing your muscles to swell with water, all this stuff. By the time the research came out, and now it's generally acknowledged, one of the most effective supplements also for cognition, but for ATP synthesis, all that great stuff. Everyone's like, I don't care, man. Either it's already part of my stack, and so the kind of short-term profits, real gains of being the early runner are gone, or people have just moved on to more extreme stuff.
Other problem is the market changes, right? So your research finally is coming out where creatine is the thing. But in that period of time, the manufacture of creatine has become so effective, the cost has dropped so low, it's a commodity.
Yeah, there's no money to be made.
There's no money to be made in it, because you're sitting there going, holy cow, creatine works. Awesome, because I was selling it at $80, a tub at about an 80% margin. I'm going to get back into this. And you go, oh, it's on the shelves at Walmart for $19.
Right.
There's nothing. And that company that has a Walmart shelf space, their volume's so high that they can live off the $3 they're making per product.
Right.
And you're sitting there going, as a small person who doesn't have the Walmart shelf space, you're like, man, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Right. So there's massive disconnects. And, it's funny because the supplement companies are always the evil bad guys in this. And you never kind of blame the marketplace or yourself. But I can promise you that when they sit around a boardroom table, right, yes, they think of how we're going to market to capture the audience interest, et cetera. But they also sit there and go, guys, I want to make the best muscle building supplement possible. And then the R&D department and the marketing department, within the constraints of what they're actually allowed to put into that product, attempts to do that, right? And the problem is that it's, obviously the marketing doesn't help by driving up the consumer's expectation, and then the expectation isn't always matched. But let's face it, with a protein powder, you can only do so much to help someone gain muscle.
Sure.
Right? And if you ever got a supplement that had drug-like effects, well, it would have drug-like effects. Because remember...
And drug-like banning.
Well, so side effects are just the effects we didn't like, right? They're not actually classified into the drug as the side effects. So if you get something that has a ton of a really big, high magnitude effects, some of those effects will probably be undesirable, right? So they can't actually do that, right? Like, they don't have the effect to just go like, okay, this is what we're going to do. we're going to do a protein powder, and no one's ever thought of this. We're going to add DECA into it, right? Like that.
Right.
Like, they can't do that.
DECA, for our listeners, is like an early form of long outlawed steroid. I mean, in the 80s, this stuff wasn't legal. But it's what Arnold used.
Apparently, I've heard that.
Quote unquote. Now I'll never get him on the show. Damn it.
Yeah, well, either that or he'll be on the show for sure. Yeah. But so that was my experience with stuff. It was watching the frustration of the supplement industry trying to launch products that were profitable and meet the demands of the consumer, which was like, obviously, I want to look like Arnold in 8 weeks. Guys, you have to have research to prove it works, and yours has to be cheaper and better tasting than everybody else's. Oh, and I don't want it to be 4 pills a serving. I'd like you to get down to 2, please. And could you have this happen in a month?
And I don't want gas either.
Yeah, and I don't want gas. It better not taste funky, right? So,
ridiculous.
Yeah. And the fun thing about that is even when people find a supplement that they actually think works,
they're not loyal, right?
They're not loyal, no, because even though it's like it's the best tasting thing they've ever had, and it's actually kind of working for them, it fits their budget. Ooh, new one that's shiny, right? And they're like, I'm going to go try that one.
I'm so guilty of that.
Yeah, it's a difficult. There's a reason why we say new and improved and advanced on our products every 6 months. It's because that's what we need to do to get people to buy the bloody product again, right?
It's crazy. Well, see, people think that the science is moving much faster than it is, as we've just learned.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask this, Brad. I just released an article a couple weeks ago about the 7 supplements that, in my experience, have actually made a difference among tens of thousands of products and the hundreds that I've tried. Although I really wish I'd consulted you first. But let me ask, which supplements in your mind and from a research perspective actually make a difference, and which ones are pure BS hype?
All right, so creatine makes a difference.
Hell yeah.
Ephedrine obviously makes a difference, but that's one of those side effects things.
Right.
You got to roll with.
Ephedrine is speed, for those not familiar. Yeah. It's literally speed.
Yep. I think yohimbine is in there as well. Has multiple effects, not all of them.
Yohimbine.
Yes, it's the alkaloid from yohimbe. You'll see it. It used to be in a lot of fat burners. I don't think it's there as much anymore. It probably got banned, but it was another one that obviously a lot of the banned ones had effects, just some of them were not so good.
Sure.
I think a lot of the nootropics have a lot of potential. Those are sort of your new age brain drugs, your vinpocetine, your huperzine, etc. I think they've got some play. I think the future will be probiotics. It's young. I mean, this is a young area, and I think there's harm to be done just as much as there is good. But I think if the science keeps going the direction it's going, prebiotics, probiotics are going to be a very mainstream consumable.
Definitely.
I have high hopes for green products. If anything, is basically an insurance type thing, or at least a way for people to get their vegetables
athletic greens kind of thing.
Yeah. And the problem with vegetables is no one wants to talk about it is they suck. Is that they, you eat a large amount of them and then you're bloated and you're in pain for a lot of people, not everybody, right? But, you hear that asparagus is great for you, so you fry a bunch of asparagus, you eat a giant plateful, and you lay on the couch dying in pain, right? So some people just can't handle big doses, whereas things like athletic greens tend to come in and help with that.
Sure, and that's, largely because our food is real nutrient poor these days. It's made in hot houses, it's picked early, it's fertilized with only NPK. So, yeah, there's no nutrients left in any of it.
It's just fiber and water that you're cramming in amazing amounts.
Sure.
Areas that not completely bunk, but you just have to be really aware of is when you get into muscle building supplements. And then I've just realized that the muscle building process, it's very complex. It's not as simple as stimulate mTOR and boom, muscle, right? Like there's just so many layers involved, whether you're dealing with the inflammation response, triggering satellite cell activation, and then how mTOR phosphorylation comes into play, and then all the checks and balances involved in muscle building. You always have to think of your muscle building supplements as permissive, right? It's your actual training that's eliciting the response, and then you're just sort of subsidizing that with the supplements, trying to think that you can just sort of get away with just supplements that build muscle the same way that, say, testosterone would. I think that's an area that's fairly short-sighted. So you just, It's not that they don't work, just taper your expectations and realize that it's the stuff you do in the gym that's really driving the initiation of that process. And then the supplements and the food are kind of what allow it to reach its full potential.
I love that. It goes with the saying, gains aren't made in the gym.
Exactly. Yeah. They're started there, and then you got to finish it off everywhere else. Yeah.
Exactly. Everywhere else.
Yeah.
Brad, on your site, something caught my eye, which is you talk about reaching an epiphany of something called, quote, health attraction, end quote.
Yes.
What does that mean?
All right. So we're looking at what people want, right? And it's outside of the giant vanity game that is health and fitness right now. There is a level of just wanting health. Right. And it's really weird because the thing about health is that it's really bloody hard to actually define
or quantify. It's
like happiness, right? You're like, oh, when you actually stop and think about it, these are some pretty tough things to deal with, right? So health attraction to me is more of a mindset. It's realizing that, if what you're trying to do here is this weird sort of health, happiness connection, right? Then a lot of it is just allowing it to happen and bringing it to you. As an example I'll give you is that I'm not sure that a structured, monotonous, eating every 4 hours, getting up in the middle of the night to eat, competition prep where you're training all the time, you're not seeing your friends because you're in diet mode and nothing tastes as good as abs look, and it's, people call it obsession, I call it determination. That lifestyle, if it's actually draining you, I'm not sure if that's healthy. Right. Yeah. And really what you want to do is attract in and realize what is actually healthy for you. It's a large part of it's that realization that just because the girl on the cover of the magazine with abs is smiling doesn't mean she's not hating life in that exact picture.
Oh, I love that.
Right. And it's that we're so caught up on the health and fitness competition, right? It's like, I am healthier than, ooh, you only don't eat gluten? Dude, I don't eat gluten and dairy. You're like, well, I don't eat gluten, dairy, or meat. I'm like, I don't eat gluten, dairy, meat, or breathe, right? Like it's this giant competition to be more healthy. And then from a body point of view, right? You're like, wow, that guy's in really good shape. Well, except for his legs, right? And like, it's always this giant sort of rip people down competition. And it's this who can be more healthy, which I don't think is healthy at all. So for me, the concept of health attraction is just sort of, if you realize really what we're trying to do here, right? So the absence of pain, the feeling good about yourself, improving yourself, but realizing that at the end of the day, what's left is still yourself, right? You don't actually get transformed into a different person. Mm-hmm. It goes a long way for really changing your mindset about how to eat, how to train, what the real goals are. Is the goal to figure out how many hours a day you can get away with working out, and then what supplements to take to recover properly so that, again, tomorrow you can train for 8 hours? Or is it trying to figure out, wow, I can get pretty good results out of, an hour and a half total across a week, and that really allows me to spend more time with my kids and my family and my friends, and just more time to be creative in other areas, right? Or I can explore different food options and still stay in a healthy body fat level, because I know that it's awesome to have abs when you're flexing, et cetera, but you don't have to be that person who has abs all the time. That's not actually a great marker of health, right?
Sure.
So,
well, it's a marker that you're below the body fat that your body, body fat's a great survival technique for your body. But damn, does it look good.
It does. But, the other thing that's interesting is you can have people who have, guys specifically, pretty close to a six-pack at 16% body fat, right? And then you can have guys who are down in the 6 and 7s, and just because they don't have a well-built, developed core, there's still no ab development that looks great on Instagram, right? So I get the ab thing because they're beautiful, but at the same time, it's to obsess about whether or not you have them, knowing that there's just some people who have them at higher body fats and don't have them at lower, et cetera. You just have to roll with that, right? And then getting too caught up in why you don't have a vein splitting down your bicep like Hugh Jackman has one. Why don't I? Like, I must be training wrong. I got to work on this. That sort of is not health attraction to me. It's almost health aversion, right? Like, you're so caught up in the game of health that you sort of forgot what health is or was.
That sounds familiar.
Ex-powerlifters get that, right? When they kind of look back at it and they go, if I was in this just because I was competitive, not because I really love powerlifting, et cetera, but I've had giant bone chips remove my elbows. I almost at 50 am weighing the pros and cons of what I was doing when I was in my 20s and 30s. And I'm not knocking powerlifters. You get all the power. You guys are strong and big, but it's weighing the pros and cons. I would go the same way with marathon runners or competitive long distance cyclists, right? When you stop at 40 or 50 and you have possibly debilitating injuries from the thing you were trying to do for health's sake previously, it really brings the question, what is health and what are we doing? So that's sort of the whole thing I'm working on.
I love it. I love it as a methodology. It's the same methodology I apply to work and business, which is this much more going to make me this much happier? And generally it doesn't.
Exactly.
So choosing happiness and choosing balance. I love that. Brad, let me ask you one more question before we get going.
Absolutely.
Like I mentioned, we like to give homework. I'm evil like that. So I hope you will join me in being a little bit evil and giving our listeners one piece of homework, whether that's trying something out, a written exercise, or even maybe an article that they absolutely have to read.
Okay. Well, let's stick with the fasting concept and let's broaden our understanding of what just a general philosophy of fasting. We're going kind of high up here, right? And so you could view meditation as a form of fasting, right? Because you're literally trying for an absence of void. And then obviously there's a fasting involving as little calories as possible. Whatever it is, it's sort of a moving towards a period of time of nothing, right? So most people are really cool with the idea if someone tells them, I just want you to try meditating. Just do 20 minutes in the morning and try it. Everybody's like, yeah, total. But when I say try fasting, people are like, never going to happen. So this is what I want you to do. If you're just a frequent eater and you're always going to be a frequent eater, but you have a desire to lose some weight, I want you to start with just trying to fast in between your meals. I know that sounds almost condescending. I don't mean it to be, but if you have prescribed meals, I'd like you just to try to not snack in between those meals and just see what it's like. I want you to pay attention to knowing that you ate 2 hours ago and that you're going to eat again in 2 hours, but I'm making you skip a handful of almonds in between, and how that makes you feel and how you wanted those almonds. So you actually feel hungry, even though you know you're full of nutrients, right? You're still digesting, but because you didn't get that one little snack, because I'm mean, but I want you to be aware of that. And you don't ever have to do intermittent fasting if you don't want to. But the best lesson to take from that is understanding the difference between hunger, because, you went to bed early last night, it's been 12 hours and you kind of want some food, and desire to eat because you saw a kid walking by with pretzel M&Ms and now you really want pretzel M&Ms, right? Like, so.
Oh my God, they make pretzel M&Ms.
Dude, they're the best. They're by far my favorite M&M. And I actually have honestly taken with some friends a game of Hungry Hippos, dumped a thing of pretzel M&Ms in it and went to town, and you will be a Hungry Hippo pro if you play with M&Ms.
Oh my God.
But don't do that. Well, I'm asking you not to snack between meals.
Forget the M&M. Sorry, my bad.
Ignore that last one. But yeah, so just try that. At one point when you're just snacking because you can, just try not to, and just pay attention to that feeling of what it's like to not allow yourself to eat when you wanted to. And you see if you can't carry that in as a lesson into how you eat and when you eat, knowing that, you can wait, right? You don't need to tide yourself over, right? So a meal will be better and probably taste better if you're like, I'm just going to wait for it. I mean, I'm literally asking you to do what your grandma told you to do and not spoil dinner.
Love it.
Try it out.
Love the grandma-related homework.
Yeah, grandma's always right.
Don't you hate that? We've talked about it on the show before. It's like, why is mom always right?
Always
grandma
right.
Doubly so.
Exactly. She's the only one who can one-up mom, right? Is grandma.
That is true. Mr. Brad Pilon, I got it right this time.
There you
Mr.
go.
Brad Pilon, let me ask you, if people want to get in touch with you, check out your book, your blog, all your amazing stuff, where do they do that?
All right. So I'm a bit of a narcissist. Everything's my name. So you can start with Twitter. So it's just at Brad Pilon, random thoughts, that kind of thing. Get a feel for who I am. If you kind of like the randomness there, you can go to bradpilon.com, which is my blog. And if you like that too, then maybe it's time to switch on over to eatstopeat.com and check out my blatant self-promotion for my book.
Love it. And we will actually link up to the book, to the blog, to the everything on our site. We'll put that in the show notes. Brad, it's been a pleasure chatting, although I'm actually starving now, so I think I might go cheat on the homework and eat and then not eat till tomorrow.
Beautiful. I love it.
Awesome. Brad, it's been a pleasure chatting. You have a great day.
You too, man.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.